Hello, everyone. Sorry about the technical challenges that we've been having today. Today is our very first hybrid meetup I think that the group has ever had, and it's our first in-person meetup since 2018. So, trying to navigate the technical issues. And please let me know if you can hear me by typing yes in the chat. Excellent. We have people saying they can hear us. This is wonderful. So today we have cybersecurity, and this is going to be for individuals, for nonprofits, for small businesses, just a whole bunch of general cybersecurity information. The meetup is usually available online in about 2 weeks, thanks to one of our sponsors. Any links that are shared in the chat during this will also be in that recording, and they will be at the very end of it. So if you're looking for any specific links, go ahead. This is an informational meetup. Please use the information, products, and services that we show at your own risk. Just because we are showing a plugin, theme, website, or anything else is not an official WordPress endorsement. Above all, we aim to always keep it family friendly, as many of us can do from home. We're going to do our best to follow the WordPress community guidelines. That means that if you break these guidelines, you'll be evicted from the meeting. No spamming or spammer-like behaviors. We have people of all different skill levels and backgrounds, so no judgment for people who are at a different level than where you're at, and generally don't be a jerk. We have a few sponsors to thank. The first is Anphira. They help companies serious about their WordPress development needs. They specialize in helping agencies and businesses that have been frustrated by their WordPress challenges. If you want more information about them, visit anphira.com/help. Our second sponsor is Easy Alley Guide. They help make web accessibility easier to implement for businesses and agencies. For more information on web accessibility, including tools, tutorials, and more, visit easyalleyguide.com. And our last sponsor is OBEE Digital Consulting, and they handle all of our YouTube recordings. They are excellent for a YouTube video production, so make sure to contact them if you need that. And our final sponsor is Klik Solutions, and they are sponsoring us today in person, and then they will give an introduction as well as a presentation all about practical, useful, secure cybersecurity. If you have questions during it, please use the Zoom chat to, and we'll queue people up there.
Again, thank you so much for allowing us to host, and for people that have come out here in person and online. Thank you so much for participating. We're very excited to host. Right, this is the first in person and hybrid in person and remote since COVID. Right, or
Since
now
before COVID.
since before COVID. So it's great to connect in person. I can provide some historic stuff after this on Baltimore City. Always available for that. I'm Arthur Olshansky. I'm Chief Executive Officer here at Klik Solutions. Roman is our employee number one. So he was our first hire in the company. We're a 13-plus-year-old IT services company. Roman's our Chief Technology Officer, so he oversees the largest team here at Klik that's made up of really amazing technology specialists and experts. And so I wanted to turn this over to Roman to talk a little bit about cybersecurity and how it's important, even more so now on websites, and as it relates to cybersecurity insurance. A lot of people are not aware that a lot of organizations are being dinged because their WordPress websites are out of compliance. So it's an opportunity for us to shine in support of clients and initiatives. We'll talk a little bit about all those different things and how it's beneficial to small businesses and nonprofits as well.
And this is also a very timely one, as one of the biggest times for malware, scams, fraud, and everything else is the holidays. Unfortunately, with just more of everything going on, especially more commerce, more people are trying to take advantage of that and scamming.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for the intro, Arthur.
That's all I got.
So Kenny, I'm gonna keep it flowing on here, so again, there's
Matt, got it.
really, this is more so notes for me than anything else. First of all, thank you guys again. Arthur mentioned this is the first meetup since before COVID, which both seems like forever ago and just yesterday. So thank you guys for being here. Louder? I have a microphone, Julia.
Oh, you do? I see.
Hey, I'm joking. Can everyone hear okay on the Zoom?
Yeah, please type yes if you can hear Roman fine on the Zoom.
Yes.
We've got yeses and thumbs up.
All right. Thank you, Julia. So, again, thank you. It's an absolute privilege. Oh, excuse me. Really way too far. Many do not follow this example. For today's, really, I meant it more as a conversation. I know this is a meetup group. Ironically, I did a Q&A session yesterday. It was probably my favorite thing ever because I don't have to preach about a particular topic and it's more conversation. So I'll try to keep it as close to that as possible. Again, cybersecurity for individuals, small businesses, and nonprofits. I know when Sam and I were talking about today, my first question was, who's going to be there? So Sam said a little bit of everybody. So we're going to talk about that, but really the ultimate emphasis for me today is to point out the fact that whatever sites you have managed, etc., you need to understand that they are all part of an attack surface, the global internet attack surface, whether you think it's not relevant to you because you're just a nonprofit or you're just a whatever. We'll talk about how that's very much still relevant. So, yeah, the audience poll, and maybe you could help me a little bit, the Zoom folks. I'm curious, who is who's actually managing WordPress sites here? Maybe show of hands. Okay, we got one. Yeah, Julia doesn't count. Who runs e-commerce on their WordPress? And I don't know how many thumbs up we got on the Zoom on the first one.
Well, I can.
Okay, cool.
We got a couple thumbs up for ecom.
Okay, wonderful. Nonprofit or community site?
I'm just gonna thumbs up every.
Okay, wonderful. Solo, who's running solo, no team? All right.
We definitely got several of those.
Okay. All right. That's exactly what I expected, and
Told you, bit of everything.
bit of everything. It's my specialty. I can't stay on track, so I'm always on a bit of everything. So, realistically, I want to talk about first a couple recent examples. We don't have to do necessarily a full show of hands. Who's heard about the post SMTP?
I
Yes.
all of them.
You know about all. Excellent.
I have not heard of this one. I want
Julia, did you raise your hand, or was that like a halfway? Okay. So again, this one's very recent. We are looking at 400,000+ installs.
Yeah, post SMTP, so the history on that
Yeah.
is a couple of years, well, for over a decade, it was owned by one individual. And then a couple of years ago, they sold it to a new company, got out of the development thing. I completely understand why they did that. Unfortunately, the new company has had security issue after bug, after just I have moved everyone away from post SMTP.
I did not know that you know all that, but that's phenomenal.
What is post because I do not know. Is that
So-
email related? Like,
So what happens is you have a WordPress website
Mhm.
and you want it to be able to send out emails. This is everything from password reset
Oh,
to contact form submissions, to
Yeah.
e-commerce receipts, any of those transactional type emails. Something that happens because a human clicked a button somewhere on the website,
Mhm.
the front end or the back end. What happens is by default, WordPress uses this WP mail function, which just tries to send it through the web server, which is very unreliable.
Right.
It doesn't have DMARC, it doesn't have DKIM, it doesn't have SPF, it doesn't have any of that stuff. It really does not go well. So instead, you set up through a transactional SMTP provider, you set up your DNS records for your DMARC, for your DKIM, for your SPF to get it all running and working. Post SMTP allows you to connect to a wide variety of these transactional email providers quite easily.
Okay, well,
There's a number of other solutions.
so it's a plugin?
It's a plugin. So I used Fluent SMTP because I actually know the cybersecurity guy who does their testing for them. So
Great.
I trust him.
You should do a YouTube video on all this type of stuff. Great idea.
Again, thank you.
I know. all
Brenda,
the
thank you for the question.
That's what I'm here for.
The irony ultimately is it's a plugin that folks will be using to try to make their emails more secure and thereby
More reliable.
reliable. And at the end of the day, this is fresh. And so again, it's not necessarily what you often hear about in the news where it's 0-day vulnerabilities. You told us the entire backstory behind it, which I will try my best to not ADHD into a rabbit hole on that topic, but it's, I would say, widespread within the industry. We have what I call UNC 5142. Is that a familiar?
Wow.
Thank you. Thank you.
We got it.
Thank you, young people. So UNC 5142 is the campaign that I believe Google Labs was the one that discovered this. It's a malicious actor. So if you've ever heard of like APT something, 513, it is attacks and campaigns that cyber experts are able to attribute to a specific group. So oftentimes you see this as nation states. So again, that's all UNC 5142. But basically, the more important details on this campaign is what it's doing. This isn't a particular plugin, this isn't a particular exploit. The campaign uses everything from plugin based exploits to core WordPress exploits, whether they're just old exploits that the developers or admins hadn't patched, or again, new ones. The real fun part is the site is actually used as a malware delivery network. Specifically, I believe they were using blockchain as part of it to further obfuscate. So every visitor that would go to a site would essentially get a payload via blockchain, which makes it very, 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 very hard to stop. And at the end of the day, the lowest common denominator, once again, it's just bad plugins or exploits that are not being patched. So that's one other.
One of the most common misconceptions about security is no one wants to hack my site. There's nothing there. They don't actually want to hack your site. They don't care about your site. You have a server, you have resources, you have a good reputation IP address. That's what they actually want.
Precisely. And so when you think about all of these sites, this is not one organization's data. It is exponential within reach. It is, with each of these sites, every user is affected and so on. So I'm going to keep this just to one more recent example. This is all from this year and really the last handful of months. But this one really stuck out to me as well. I asked earlier about e-commerce. So WooCommerce checkout skimmers. Has anyone heard about any? Jen, you don't count. I know you heard. But again, these are legitimate plugins that are widely used. And ultimately, what ends up happening is using one of these vulnerabilities or exploits, these attackers are able to effectively, again, they're not necessarily after taking down your site. That's not really monetizing for them. For them, they'd rather very quickly use what you have, either steal data. So in this case, they were used to effectively, as part of the checkout process, they would almost man in the middle send those pieces of data off. So again, huge, large scale campaigns. And again, it's the same lowest common denominator. Any attack, and I've done speeches on this that I think have bored people to death, where I actually deconstruct the steps of an attack and everything that goes into it. I imagine it would be the equivalent of explaining the complexities of like a football playbook to somebody who doesn't watch football, which I don't know if it'll really land. But again, the threat is real. And I think ultimately, Jen, you very eloquently pointed out a lot of this. It's the ordinary sites that are targeted. So that is pretty much the main point that I wanted to drive here. Again, nonprofit commerce, solo providers, what have you. These are just some of the ways that they ultimately can use your site in a non-malicious, sort of destructive way.
We have a question that just came in through the chat.
Absolutely.
Asking how are web managers alerted to these compromises? So you've been talking about a number of different compromises that we know about because we're subscribed to 517 different things. how do regular average everyday people hear about these things?
Oh, that's a very good question.
So I'll answer it then.
Please, yeah, because you're very well versed in this.
So there's a number of different plugins like Wordfence, Solid Security, Patchstack, and these are installed on your own website, so they know what plugins you have. They know what thing you have. So instead of just saying, you know, some random newsletter that's telling you these 500 different vulnerabilities, they're saying, okay, these things are installed on your site. I know what version you're running. And so I'm not just going to tell you everything. I'm going to say, hey, you have something installed on your site. It's this version. This version is vulnerable. Get it updated ASAP. So those services that I just mentioned, WordFence, Solid Security, Patchstack, those are some of the biggest names in WordPress that are going to send you those kinds of alerts.
Yes. So I will note on, just from my seat, you know far more, Jen, on your WordPress level items, especially. I am very blessed to have some WordPress specialists in our organization. I've joked about, in my own career, the longer I go, the further away from the weeds I get. One of the, I would say, privileges I have here is working with that team. Specifically, my point is more so representing our soccer team. So again, in our case, and if there's anyone here that does do certain things at scale, there's a lot of vulnerability scanning tools that we use as well. I think a lot of what you pointed out, Jen, is excellent, but everyone to be able to deploy within their WordPress environments. A lot of what we do also focuses on the external side of scanning, sort of not from within, but from the outside in
Yes.
as well.
There's a whole bunch to, is your own computer that you're using secure?
Yes.
And that's especially where you guys get involved. And also, is your email being checked? Is your email secure? Because that's, one of the biggest points of intrusion is going to be the emails. They're coming in as phishing scams.
Yeah. I have a slide towards the end here. So what's the real question? We talked about plugins and what we can do. I'm the one thing I always hit with the bottom line is it's not a specific tool. Security, as cliche as this sounds, it's not a technology, it's very much a mindset. And so it's the way you think when you are building, whether it's your site or a client site, or again, a nonprofit that you might be participating in and helping.
It's an overall strategy, and it's
Yeah.
not just, it's basically whenever you interact with something digitally, you need to have a strategy behind you, regardless of whether it's a website, if it's an app, or if it's your email. It's strategy beats tools.
Absolutely. And again, in our world, it boils down oftentimes to compliance. This is where we help a lot of our clients, and that's where our focus ends up being. And it really does shift the mindset of how you view things. It changes perspective significantly. So again, I tried to put together some basic, be honest about what you can actually do, because I think a lot of nonprofits have amazing visions, but when you get into the nitty gritty of developing, and Jen, I see you nodding. I'm sure you've had those conversations as well with folks that want crazy membership systems and association systems and so on and so forth. And, all of the data that those systems likely house. Yes, be very honest on what the capabilities are and so on and so forth. Again, backup process always wins. Check-ins. Again, if you don't have a written security policy, if you don't have a BCDR plan, all these great things, just set a reoccurring invite. Make sure everyone's working together and communicating, I would say, is another really important part of life, quite frankly, at work.
Jen, will there be a Q&A session after this? Okay, I'm holding I have several questions. I'm holding my questions.
Q&A at the end.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. Okay. So for the agencies and e-commerce, this is more where I would say it aligns to a bit of our scale a little bit. Again, automate what you can. ironically enough, the Q&A we did yesterday was all about AI and automation. And a lot of my bottom line with automation is if you can put it into a checklist that is repeatable every single time, automate it. And that's a big thing. Again, I mentioned earlier in our world, there's static testing, dynamic testing, there is code scanning, vulnerability scanning, and penetration testing. We try to automate as much of that as we can. And again, if you're an agency and you have multiple sites that you're responsible for, whether it's a plugin that's going to give you alerts on which plugins need to be updated, or if it's automated scanning, please do that. Have actual monitoring, real monitoring of some sort. Again, a plugin will suffice as long as there's information and alerts of some sort that are actionable. As I said earlier, it's a mindset, not a checklist. It's not what should I do. It's more a matter of where is your responsibility and who is it to. So if it's for finding data that's potentially in your workplace, if it's for memberships. So think about it from that standpoint of, again, for us, it's compliance. So we have contracts with our clients that they write out exactly what we need to do. In this case, sometimes it's not as obvious, unfortunately, until after something bad happens. And so I would really encourage everyone to be proactive in thinking that through, so you're not thinking about it after the time. And yeah, I said I had a slide later. It's actually kind of anticlimactic. You're not going to be able to do everything all at once. I think a lot of times historically, whether it's our clients or myself in days of old, we would want to attack everything at once. We would want to overhaul the system and build it perfect right from the beginning. I'm assuming, Jen, you know a thing or two about that feeling. But that ultimately, I believe I heard a saying of perfection is the enemy of good. And ultimately, my biggest message is just do one thing this week, one thing next week. Make sure that you are at least dedicating time to be intentional about security compliance. And that's sort of it. And I think at this point we have Q&A.
We can get Q&A. Kenny, can you switch back to my slides and go to the question slide?
Yeah.
And then we have open questions. So if you want to drop your question in the chat, if you want to ask your question out loud, just drop a question mark into the chat.
Well, I'll start with the first question, and I just wanted to see if others have run into this scenario. So, we're an IT company, and we were bidding on services for like a very large organization. They use a third-party platform called Security Scorecard. Security Scorecard is like a vendor risk management, risk assessment, but one of the functions of this is it browses your domain. And at that time, our website was hosted on a shared server with probably hundreds of websites on there. And they found vulnerabilities
On many of those.
on many of those, not ours, but it dinged
Other
up.
one's IP address.
Yes. And then it found web domains that are similar that they tied into us. And it ended up giving us a D score. And it created a lot of problems with this opportunity for us. I wanted to see if others have run into similar scenarios and maybe there's some ways to overcome that.
Yes,
Is that a good question?
Yeah. Robin, want to answer?
Yeah. Well, again, from our side, I mean, this is almost not fair because I know the remediation list that we took.
Well, tell
Sure.
give their you got a D score, and now what did you do? What's the story?
Well, the first thing I did was call him down. And I was like, that's not us, man. That's not us. So again, just communication. I think realistically, and I talk about this a lot with security as a whole, people are terrified. Whether it's a security scorecard review or a client survey that you have to fill out, it's number one, as silly as it sounds, is communicating. And so we were able to communicate back of this, and this is not related to Klik. Again, we did change our web host at that time
To get a dedicated IP.
Correct. But outside of that, I believe one of the other things we did do is we actually signed up for a separate service that monitored domains that had
Mhm.
similarities with ours. And so again, that's a huge focus right now with phishing, with a whole bunch of security breaches, ironically. But it ultimately it does have to do with what host you end up using, what type of host, where. I would say I don't know if anyone here uses DigitalOcean. No, we got one.
Mhm.
Nothing against DigitalOcean. I've gotten into conversations, ironically, with our own like senior developers when they found out that our SOC team blocked DigitalOcean, oftentimes by default. Well, that's a perfectly good system. I'm like, well, that's because you're using it in a perfectly normal way. So again, just be mindful of the overall reputation of where you are hosting your sites as well.
And
Anything that
as far as actually your website, what most of the people that I have hosting with me is what I do is I block all hosting providers from accessing their website. Because the reality is, if a hosting provider, if a server center server is trying to get into your website, it is most likely a hacked website trying to distribute malware. It's probably not an actual person or having anything to do with a person because servers don't visit websites. That's not really a thing they do. People visit websites. We want people to visit our websites. We don't want all the other bots and all the other traffic on there.
Thank you. I have another question.
And the
Is there, yeah,
let's see if there's
yeah,
questions
maybe-
in that chat
I
first.
got questions for Dave.
So Cloudways, which is our hosting provider, uses DigitalOcean. They are now owned by DigitalOcean. DigitalOcean bought them several years ago. So they heavily promote and heavily use DigitalOcean as their thing. And that's one of the many reasons why I have stopped recommending Cloudways. They have many other problems.
But DigitalOcean, we know it's very
Yeah.
popular for a lot of.
Then there's another comment from Eric. And he says that blocking hosting providers is terrible practice since you block monitoring tools. So I have a stack of Cloudflare rules. So one of the top rules is going to be the typical monitoring tools, the typical SEO type tools, and those all get an allow. And then the block for the hosting providers is down below that. All right, those were the questions. Anyone else who has a question?
Just, I do have a question. You mentioned, and I was very interested because I think a lot of organizations miss on this, right? Is offsite or off backup tools and systems. Are there some that folks can recommend? I'm just curious to learn a little bit more about backups because oftentimes I think people go to WordPress and they just initiate backup, and it's probably a very similar scenario.
So depends on where. So WordPress has two sites. There's the WordPress.com, which is part of Automatic. That's the name of the company. And there is WordPress.org, which is the open source software, which is what the meetup is really about. And that you install on your own hosting provider. So that's whatever hosting provider you have. And some of them include backups, some of them do not. Some of them make an easy process for you to load in third-party tools to give you backups. Some make it a nightmare. So there's a huge amount of variety in the backups, in what's included. Some of the hosting providers do in fact have remote backups as part of their software solution. Some have on-server backups. You have to actually ask these questions because I haven't seen any provider that actually publicly says this on their information pages. You have to ask them where those backups are and how they relate to the server. And then there's some of the most popular tools are going to be Managed WP, Blog Vault, and WP Umbrella. And these are third-party providers that allow you to back up to their remote systems. So they will back up to their own remote servers. So it's definitely not on your server.
Yeah.
It's in another data center, and you can normally download those backups. You can restore them. You can some of them allow you to even copy it to another hosting provider and allow you to even transfer through their tools, which can be really helpful. That answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions?
Someone had asked in the chat, don't all folks use bots? So a bot is basically just a little bit of script that does something. So a bot is neither good nor bad. It's how you use that bot. It's like a hammer. A hammer's not good or bad. A hammer can help you build a wall. A hammer can also kill someone. But the hammer isn't good or bad. There's lots of bots. So yes, every hosting company I know has little processes that run on their servers that automate all sorts of tasks. Every one of those is a bot. There's also bots out there that are being sent by malicious actors, and those are attacking websites. Those are trying to automate email campaigns to phish you. They're doing all sorts of different things. Roman, do you want to add?
Yeah, bots. Especially the last 3 years or so with everything, between AI and GPT and everything else, the term bot is just used all over the place. And as you said, I like to use the word container. That's something that's been relevant in our world. But yeah, it's a container script. And so again, if your site, and you pointed this out, Jim, with what whitelist you have in your Cloudflare, if your site is looking for SEO, bots are good. You want to make sure that the robots.txt, ironically enough, is properly aligned, and you guys are getting the, I guess, Google AdWords and words, analytics appropriate. So yeah, it's neither good nor bad. Be weary of anyone that sells you bots, though.
Someone asked in the chat, any input or comments about using Updraft Plus to offload backups to AWS S3 or S3 compatible services or Google Drive? Did you want to take that?
I would say I don't know Updraft in particular.
Okay, Updraft is a plugin. So it allows you to offload your backup to many different providers, Box, Dropbox, Google Drive, AWS containers, tons of different services. You can go ahead and create your backups, run your backups, offload your backups. The one thing I don't like about Updraft Plus is that it runs on your server, so it's using your server resources. Now, the good news is it does, if I remember right, package incremental backups. So it's not trying to, back up a 10 gigabyte website in one go. It's just trying to back up since the latest backup.
The deltas.
Exactly.
Yeah. The other point I would add there is your backups are only as good as where you're housing them and how quickly you can get them operational. So it sounds excellent. We have tons of clients that use AWS S3 storage. Again, with S3, be mindful of how big your backup is, because the extraction and egress of that is a little bit slower. So no,
What do you mean by slower? Like if I have, let's say, an incrementally backed up site getting to 10 gigabytes.
S3 storage is slower storage. So think of it as spindle disks versus SSD versus really old spindle disks. And so S3 is kind of the really old spindle disks. It's why the price is what it is also on it. It's using the highest possible compression algorithms, the highest and strongest deduplication algorithms. Again, 10 gigabytes may not be anything huge. This is far more relevant when you have a terabyte, potentially there. But other than that, again, I don't know about Dropbox or your Google Drive necessarily.
They're pretty fast.
Speed wise, yes. In terms of security, that's the other thing. AWS, I like the idea of putting things into a container there. So just my technical 2 cents on it.
That is all the questions we have in the chat. Anyone else in person have any questions? Apparently I need to invite you to all my meetups.
Yeah, I'm ready. I'm available.
I may have a question. I'm trying to put it into words in my head. So I'm the scenario project manager for an agency in DC, and we work with a number of freelancers all over the world. So one thing that I experience personally is as our cybersecurity abilities increase, I have a harder time getting people into my websites to work on them. And I'm just one person, so managing access for a number of people, making sure that everybody can get into the site, especially freelancers. They're probably working with dynamic IPs, can be very cumbersome. So I'm curious if this is something that you have run into, have any recommendations?
VPN to a US address. So if they're in like, let's just randomly say the Philippines, they need to get a VPN into a US IP address. Once they VPN into a US IP address, you're gonna have a much easier job getting them into your sites.
Okay, yeah, we do deal sometimes with server environments where we're whitelisting each IP address individually. So that is kind of
Well,
push and pull.
depending on the VPN provider, you can get a static IP, which means that they would always log in from the same IP, which means you wouldn't be constantly patching in.
Yeah, I wonder if that's something that our agency could invest
was-
in rather
Yes.
than having each of our.
It's, yes.
If I could walk down that path a little bit as well, we have our own employees from all over the world.
Yeah,
And so with all of the compliance requirements that are out there, and again, we'd be surprised, just because you may not be dealing in a government space or a finance space, it doesn't really exclude anyone. You hit the nail on the head when you said it's something the agency needs to invest
Yeah.
in. I cannot stress that part enough. Whether it is a dedicated VPN service that is centrally managed, do you have a IT team within the agency?
not really. We're a creative agency, so
We'll follow.
think
up
that
with
says
you.
enough.
I'll let Arthur.
No, but like, for example, we have a law firm, for example, that has a global presence, right? And what we do is we have a dedicated VPN in Microsoft Azure
Mhm.
that they control, and they allow people to remote into that, and it's static. And from there, they can get into WordPress, and they control all that stuff, they proper logging and audit trails and stuff like that. That's one way to do it. Fairly expensive.
It boils down to what the industry term is controls.
Mhm.
What can you control? And so, yes, you can control the general regional IP through like a NordVPN, or there's a million of them out there. You can control specific IP for everybody if you set up that dedicated firewall for them to use. Now, in our case, we also have hosted desktops. So we have staff overseas where, quite frankly, we want whatever work they're doing to not even leave our environment. And so in that case, also within Azure, relatively cost effective because I'll spare you this. It's just imagine you're logging into your laptop, but it happens to be in the cloud. And then at that point, it's no different than that freelancer being right there in your office, or at least the equivalent. Thank you. Good question.
Yeah, there's also a few different providers for basically remote computers. So basically, you could be working on little more than a tablet, and you're remoting in to a temporarily spun up computer with a giant GPU on it because you need to do a whole bunch of graphics work.
Mhm.
Like you need to be doing video editing, and so you can literally be doing it on a tablet that doesn't have much of any video ability, but you bought a month for like $30 of a much higher end machine.
Very cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
I got a question. So one stat that really jumped out was that 96% of the vulnerabilities were with like plugins and themes and not the core WordPress itself.
Mhm.
Is there any vetting that happens to get your plugin or theme on the WordPress marketplace?
There is. So there is the WordPress.org plugin repository. That's the kind of official hosted repository. There are a number of automated checks that happen, and there's more scrutiny on the very first upload than there is on subsequential uploads. There are automated checks that run on further down the line uploads, but there's no longer the manual checks. It is volunteer supported, so it is only the manual checks are only happening on the first go. Once you're in, you're no longer getting manual checks, you're getting all automation. Then there are everywhere else you can get a plugin.
Right.
which is going to be various different plugin marketplaces. And then you have individual plugin provider websites. And there is an effort, the name of it is escaping me at the moment, it's with Joe Stavak. But basically to federize or get it away from only having the WordPress official repository as a single point of failure, to have an actual distributed system, much more like how Linux does distribution, so that plugins and themes, and the hope is in the future to include pro, so paid plugins and paid themes, so that they will be able to get outside of this single silo, single point of failure, and have much more of a distributed distribution system, and also have a little bit more in the way of checking, and have an actual board of directors making decisions as to what checks should be in place.
Yeah, I would add to this again, it's, the paradigm is a bit different in our world, but the concept is very similar as well. In our case, because there's a lot of customization that we do, and it's not just WordPress, it's a whole lot of other stuff. That's where I mentioned, we're just using vulnerability scanning a lot of the times in code scanning tools. Again, I know with a lot of distros, and Jen, you pointed out that initial, it's very similar to App Store, Google Play Store. That initial push is the most scrutinized one, but then there's constant updates. Again, those updates oftentimes, they might just say security updates, patching. You don't necessarily know what the security updates are. And so, again, there might be some scrutiny within whether it's the WordPress.org. I won't even try to pronounce the federated one you mentioned, Jen. But ultimately, what I would also recommend is some sort of external scanning tool, because again, there's plugins that are used that just are not updated and assumed safe and everything, but there's some exploit that might exist that might just pop up.
Right.
And so an up-to-date vulnerability scanning tool of some sort will constantly make sure everything is kosher in that sense. Actually, I know Ken, our director of centralized services, was just telling me about a WAF system that also has a Cloudflare style CDN as well as a vulnerability scanner built in.
What is a WAF?
Web
Application firewall.
Okay. CDN?
content delivery.
Checking both of you guys.
It's a bit tricky, of course.
This has been great.
All right, outside of our official WordPress meetup, you can also visit us on our website at Anphira.com, Baltimore WordPress Meetup. And you can also visit wphelpdesk.support. And there are resources and information on getting help with WordPress outside of hours. Our next meetup is back to virtual. That is December 3rd at 11 a.m. Eastern, and it's going to be one of our Ask Me Anything WordPress, where you bring the questions. We try and answer them. Well, it's online, so
She could.
no commuting.
She might. I think she might be.
Yeah, I think some of our team members are online. This was great.
Shout out all
Olha.
no offense.
Is Olga here?
All the WordPress.
No offense to the other work.
Nice.
Developers, but always my
Thank
favorite.
yes, thank you all for coming, and I hope to see you in December.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.